we've got lots of terrific people at Mindflight7. We've got a terrific team in WA, which Liam's a part of, and we've got a big team here in Victoria. We've set up 19 actually and more VR rooms across schools in Victoria and Western Australia, and we've delivered VR experiences to 22,000 plus students since launching. So there's definitely a great interest in VR, and the students love it, and the teachers and careers professionals start to see how powerful it is. So these are just a few of our team members who we recently had a photo shoot, which was rather fun. So we're keen to see if you could just put in the chat if you have used VR before, whether it's you've gone to like a zero latency or one of those places and with kids and done some VR, or perhaps you might have gone and done some at university, or if it's all fairly new to you and you haven't had a chance to dive in. Is there anyone with a bit of experience in VR? It doesn't matter if you haven't, it just really helps and us to know. And if you have, it's great for people to share their experiences and how they've found it. And also it's come a long way. It might depend also when you did it. Probably about 6 years ago, there was those VR headsets you put your iPhone in. I remember one of my children wanted one. It's come a long way since then.
Or even, I think in the 80s and the 90s, there was a whole big bit of virtual reality, and definitely we've come a long way.
It was apparently a Nintendo one, my son told me.
It was Nintendo and Atari did one back in like the 80s, because I think that was the whole like cyberpunk kind of movement back then, but a long time ago. So
there's been lots of different variations. So someone's got a MetaQuest 2 at home, so that sounds like they definitely know a bit and can certainly.
Beat Saber's a good one. So
yeah. So, and that also and plays Beat Saber with kids. All right. We've got some actually music soundstage, which is pretty good, isn't it, on the apps? Sort of like Beat Saber, but not, because you kind of create your own music. So you've got a bit of ideas. So there might also be some things that you can contribute as we go through. So it is interesting thinking about high tech, or how high tech students are to a degree. Often when we go into schools, there's not as many kids as you think would have done VR. Only a small percentage of them have actually used VR in any kind of way, which it's quite surprising. I thought there'd be a lot more students that had. But the great thing is they're all really good, aren't they, Liam? They pick it up in about 10 seconds, whereas us, or me, older people, probably takes about an hour.
Kids are pretty good with the stuff they pick up pretty quick. So, so I'll take this one. So if you're not already aware, VR obviously stands for virtual reality. So it refers to a computer-generated simulation of a three-dimensional environment that can be interacted with in a seemingly real or physical way using specialized equipment. In our case, for our expos, we use a VR headset, the Oculus 2, and with controllers. The goal of VR is to create an immersive experience for the user where they feel like they are present inside the virtual environment and interact with stuff if it were real. VR technology has many applications, such as gaming, education, training, and therapy, because there's a big world of VR out there. I usually don't recommend the cheesy ones you get at arcades, like, oh, I've been on a roller coaster. That's not really what we're about in VR. So in an educational context, VR technology has many potential uses for students, both inside and outside of the classroom. So some examples being the virtual field trips. So VR can enable students to explore in different parts of the world without leaving the classroom. For example, students can take a virtual field trip to historical sites or a natural wonder. We actually have our own experience where you can check out the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is pretty awesome. They provide immersive learning environments. So VR can create environments which allow students to interact with simulations and models, providing a hands-on experience that's not possible with the traditional classroom. If there's any science teachers in the chat, I'm very sure you're aware of the funness of sorting out hazards for trying to organize science experiments. In VR, there's none of those sort of problems. You can do different chemical reactions, explosions, and no, no consequences from that. We also use it for special education for students with special needs. It can also be used for stress and anxiety management. And our main focus today is career exploration. So we'll be talking about that. Next slide. So for career inspirations is what we want to be talking about today. So VR technology, we believe, is a valuable tool for career exploration, as it allows individuals to experience different job environments, tasks, and challenges in a simulated and immersive way. Some examples of how we do simulations for career exploration. One is job shadowing, is where VR can enable individuals to shadow professionals in different careers by simulating their work environment and their daily task. This can provide an opportunity to gain insight into what would it be like to work in a specific field before committing to a career path. Because I know quite a few of my friends, they've either studied teaching or doctorates, and once they spend 2 years studying the course and they get to the prac part and they're like, oh, maybe it isn't for me. I actually don't like the practical aspect of it. So with VR, you can hopefully cut out that time period of getting a good idea if you actually enjoy a career or not. With that, so training and other simulations. So VR can be used to simulate real-world jobs and tasks, allowing individuals to practice and develop the skills required for a particular job. We're already seeing that with surgeons. The mines use it a lot. The military, they use it a lot for simulated trainings. If anyone's been to virtual job fairs, are pretty popular, where you can put on a headset and you can go to different locations to talk to different careers. I think that's it for that slide. So I think Kelly will show you some videos which give a brief insight into the scientific applications of VR and other fun stuff, if we can get that on. I think we're playing the other. If you like, Kelly, I can try screen share mine. I don't know if the latency with my internet might be a little bit better, if you like. Oh.
Sorry, is it not?
I mean, do you want me to? I think my internet might be a little bit better if we want to play another video.
Okay, you can play the next one.
Sure.
I'll leave that one up to you.
No worries. Let me just get it up.
That comes a little. We'll continue on and we can go back and play that one if we have time. Yeah. So as you would have seen with VR, not only are there kind of job shadowing experiences, there's actually real doing experiences. Students can perform a virtual surgery and get a sense of, well, what they enjoyed about that or didn't. And they might have liked actually the precision and the kind of cutting and the medical routine, or they might have liked the fact that they felt like they helped somebody. They can go to space and see, they might not necessarily want to be an astronaut, but you find that actually they are really interested in space, and then you can start to build upon what kind of careers might be around that. So there's so many amazing, we have over 200 apps and experiences. There's so many amazing things that they can really try out and see, is that something that might be of interest to me? Am I curious to learn a bit more?
So as we've just mentioned, we actually do develop our own apps in-house. So one of the more popular ones is open heart surgery, whereas we get students to simulate being as an open heart surgeon. So it's a completely interactive experience where students get to learn about the heart and then actually apply surgical techniques, which is a lot of fun. There's a lot of teachers and students love that one. As I mentioned before, with the science experiments, we actually do have our own chemistry lab as well that we've developed. So students can do different kinds of chemical experiments and produce different kind of molecules, which is also a lot of fun. We have a whole bunch of apps, which I could spend a whole hour talking about, but I won't do that. Some fun ones in the future that we're currently in development is Life in 2050, which is very relative to our... I'll keep going. For our career inspiration. So it's to get students to think about what jobs are going to be like in 2015, what the world environment is going to be like in 2050. So we're planning on developing an interactive experience so students can think about what they want to be doing in the future, because a lot of students, well, I mean, not just students, it's very hard to imagine what life is going to be like in another 30 years, or even what students want to be doing in the next 5 years. So we're hoping giving them a good environment to start thinking about the future.
Yeah. So we've got lots of experiences. We also have experiences from overseas, because VR educational development is a new area in itself. It's a new career, and there's only a couple of companies in Australia that are creating their own content. So we're very fortunate to have a great team here who do create some of our content experiences for us. Plus, as I said, we source experiences typically from the US. They're a few years ahead of us in what they do. So in terms of VR as a careers tool, it's easy just to think it's sort of for games and fun. It's once, as I said, once you kind of go in there and put the experiences on, it becomes really clear how it can really bring even STEM careers to life. So often students, there's not a number of students actually going into the STEM careers, and nowhere near as many as we need. And often I think the challenge can be those subjects in isolation don't necessarily form a clear picture of pathways that are really inspiring and engaging for students. Whereas when you go in and do these experiences, students start to think of, we actually get quite a lot. I like science now. I didn't realise science was this. Those look like really interesting careers. So we often find that the thinking around science can really switch once they go and do some of those experiences and see how that can translate into real world careers for them, because they're immersed in doing the experience. It's like they're there. And virtual reality is so good these days that the brain's actually getting tricked about what's real and what's virtual reality. It's really come a long way. We do careers trades flights, which is also really amazing, because students they might think, actually, I want to do a trade, but as we know, there's so much diversity in trades. There's sort of the artisan carpentry type trades, there's the electrical trades, there's the sort of project management trades and safety trades, there's the building and construction, big machines. So they actually get a chance. There's simulated forklift driving. They can learn how to drive a forklift, and really, if you can't do the VR experience, chances are you don't have that sort of sensing, perceiving, attune kind of with your body and objects to go down that path. So it actually gives students a real idea about what their strengths are and interests. So we find that it's a great way of really helping students refine, well, what kind of trade would be good for me, not just, I want to do a trade. We also find that it's a great tool. Students start to think about, what subjects are like. They actually get to experience, and what is geography in its, not just that's a subject. They can actually go and experience what geography is like, and that can also help with subject selection and or career paths. And they do see how all their strengths and interests can translate into so many different career paths. Plus, they learn that they actually have all these skills that they didn't know they had. And we're really pleased, we constantly have adults and young people say that, they wish that they had this VR careers experiences when they were at school, because that would have helped them in terms of selecting their career paths to take. There is a link in the chat, and I'll get you on to repost it if it's not coming up. Have people seen the 100 Jobs of the Future report? It's pretty, there's some pretty interesting jobs there, and some of it seems sort of far-fetched, and then I think some of it doesn't. I think there's some really things that are already happening. And we see that obviously the STEM jobs are where the biggest growth is for students. And of course, we don't want to, we don't want to tell students what they should be doing, but also we need to be mindful that it's important that they're aware of where the growth job opportunities are, and not kind of channeling them, directing them to areas where there's no career paths or they might be short-lived. So STEM is really important, plus all those interpersonal skills, which we also have some great apps around those personal effectiveness tools as well for students, but understanding that the jobs of the future require the tech, but they also require the people skills, the human-centered design, the empathy, and some of those other skills, and definitely the creativity. And we actually run an arts and careers program as well, which is really important for getting students to think again more broadly. So there's lots of different research research and reports out there, and it depends what you read, what you kind of agree with. But I think COVID's really accelerated the fact that technology is going to continue to take, a massive role in our lives and our careers. So this report suggesting by 2030, half the current occupations won't exist, and of those that remain, they'll be very different based on artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, VR, augmented reality, so many different things, and they will just become mainstream. There's this nanomedical engineer, this is one of the jobs of the future, but we already know that actually a lot of surgeons now do part of their training using virtual reality, and they're also piloting doing actual virtual surgery. So probably again 5-10 years ago that would have seemed so crazy and insane, but that's happening now. So I think some of these things that we think are potentially a long way off aren't actually so far away.
Just go back and watch the Jetsons.
So some of the jobs of the future are already here. I've added in what some of our team do, their VR and events facilitators and coordinators. And again, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have thought to apply for a job where you're, researching apps and playing with apps and training students and having career conversations with students around their careers and what apps might be good for them. It's like a whole new job that wouldn't have existed 5 years ago. We have robotic mechanics already. There's some pretty 100-year counsellor that could be quite interesting for the career counsellors there, thinking about being a 100-year career counsellor and what that might look like. There's also virtual and augmented reality experience creators, which we have now, and we actually have an app and a program, because we find when we go to the schools, there's always 1 or 2 students who actually want to do VR design. They want to learn how to code and make and create VR content as well. So again, 5 years ago, that probably wouldn't have happened, but now this is, a real reality for kids. And I know everyone sort of sees it and hears it, but it is really quite scary thinking about the difference of growth for STEM-related careers versus non-STEM created careers, and the fact that what will happen when we can't fill these roles. And we need these STEM occupations. If you think about all the climate and environmental challenges we have, we need scientists to help us solve these. We need students to be going into these paths to help deal with all these sort of health, environment, sustainability kind of problems. So it is a real issue that we're not inspiring and engaging students enough to want to take these paths and study. Now, Liam, I'm going to hand over to you to have a go at playing this video.
I can do that, no worries. I'll share my screen. So, yep.
Do you want me to stop sharing?
I think it should already,
okay.
So hopefully that's all good.
Oh, you might need to go back, and when you share it, you have to hit sound button. Like there's a little button on the bottom left. Sorry, Liam, I should have just kind of exit, stop sharing and go in, and then.
So share screen.
And then there's a bottom on the bottom left about
share sound, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I taught you something. I feel good.
Right, well, so this is a video from Pfizer. which it is 6 years old, but it does provide a wonderful message about practical uses of VR technology. Can you hear that?
For scientists, we have to look at a lot of information. And you can think about it as a scientist has an enormous landscape around them, which is filled with information, and they have to identify the critical information that they need in order to move forward. So a way to think about it is if you walk outside and it's very foggy. Virtual reality, what it does is it removes the fog. My name is Kevin Halleck. I'm a physical chemist and biophysicist by training. My role at Pfizer has to do with computational modeling and data visualization. The VizCube was built by VizBox. Most environments like the VizCube are used for architecture or engineering. What the VizCube allows people to do is it allows everyone to look at information, say a protein structure or brain anatomy, and you don't have to be an expert in order to participate in a discussion. By lowering the barrier required to access that information, it allows everybody to get up to speed on the amount of information that they need to know in order to research a drug faster. I think virtual reality will end up impacting every stage of drug development in the pharmaceutical industry. It'll allow researchers to explore their data faster. I mean, they won't have to come to something like the VizCube. In the future, you'll be able to look at it on your phone, you'll be able to look at it on a pair of goggles. It will impact clinical studies because it'll allow clinicians to have an easier time engaging patients who are testing the drugs or testing a procedure. It can impact therapies because you'll be able to identify which parts of somebody's behavior using a virtual environment need to be impacted the most in order to improve the patient's life. We're at the beginning of the journey.
Thanks, Liam. So it was pretty amazing to see that, and there's lots of videos like this around from the last few years. And actually recently there was a student who was 15 using VR and he solved like a virus problem. And it's sort of saying, imagine if we, rather than waiting 10 years later, we could have students actually working on science and medical breakthroughs at school with VR. Like it's pretty phenomenal, the power of what it can do. It's gone back to the video. I must have clicked on the hyperlink too much.
So that takes us back to careers in STEM. So we're generally seeing these days a lot of students are discouraged or do not want to go into STEM careers. And why is that? So Australia's workforce of 11 million people, 2 million of them have some kind of STEM qualification, and only 6% of that have a university STEM qualification. So we want to provide an opportunity where students are more inclined to study STEM, because a lot of students don't really understand, as we've mentioned before, when you're learning something from a textbook and it's like, well, why am I learning this? Like, what's the point of me doing this? And a study conducted by the Stevens Institute of Technology actually said that students who complete internships related to the field are 300% more likely to graduate with a STEM degree, because they can see the actual application of what they're actually learning about. And with that, completing research with a faculty member in that degree also increases a 121% increase in STEM persistence throughout their degree. So what we want to apply with virtual technology is having that kind of internship experience, or having students to have an understanding of like, why am I studying this? Or what are the applications of studying this chemistry? Like, what can I do with this knowledge? Because the problem is a lot of people just aren't taught how to think like a scientist. Students are taught to read textbooks and memorize them, but not necessarily to think like a scientist in solving new problems. And I mean, that's not anyone's fault. It's the students aren't usually in an environment where they're able to apply themselves, like in a STEM degree, which they will find interesting. That's the next slide. So as with going on from what I just mentioned, so how we actually run the career VR incursions when we go to schools, we mainly focus on tested programs for year 9s and 10s. Start thinking them about ATAR and pre-ATAR if they even want to do this sort of stuff. I think the WA government's actually funding or giving the funding for us to actually run these courses. A lot of schools in WA are getting the government to pay for it, which is great. So how we approach these sessions with a fixed and growth mindset. So the overall lesson objective is to get students, one, more familiar with VR technology. As we've mentioned just before, that's probably something they're going to be more and more working with. And two is to promote a growth mindset. A lot of students are stuck in the kind of fixed mindset of what their skill sets are, because they never have the opportunity to really expand past that, or they have these outside influence, like their parents. Like, my parents have studied this, I've got to do this, because that's the expectations that are laid on them, necessarily because they never really think to look outside that bubble. So that's the wonderful thing with our career expos. We provide 200 different experiences over all faculties that students, I've had many students working with where like they try one app and they're like, oh, I didn't like this, it's not for me. And it's like, well, I sit down and talk to them and be like, well, what are you interested in? It's like, oh, I like to play drums, a lot of music. I'm like, well, we actually do have apps which, like Soundstage, where you can make music and they can work with that. It's like, oh, this is actually really engaging. Vice versa with chemistry, or we have different dissections. And it's like, oh, I want to, the students don't get too many opportunities to do too many dissections anymore. So we get kids to think about what they like and do that for a bit. And then we pull them out and was like, all right, we want you guys to try something which traditionally might make you uncomfortable. So they will do an experience where they think they may not like it, but they all go into it. For example, with the heart surgery, they may not like that kind of technical process, but when they get into it, they may not want to be a heart surgeon, but they might be like, oh, I actually find human biology really interesting, seeing how the different parts work together. I may want to look in those kind of fields. Another thing is, another big one is trades. We do a lot of work with schools for trades. Because trades are a wonderful one because they're very easy to port over in VR, making them a interactive experience. Especially our big one is forklift simulator, because obviously we don't want year 9s and year 10s driving a forklift, but we want them to get them excited about it. So we have a training certified experience to get kids to learn with those kind of equipment so they can learn how to drive a forklift. Which, this is a lot of what I've just talked about. So yeah, with the incursions, we don't believe in a one-size-fits-all module. We do personally adapt our incursions to the school's needs. If a school comes to us like, we want to have a focus on trades, can you provide the opportunity for us? So we go in and we heavily emphasize our experiences which focus on trades. Vice versa, if we've had HAS teachers be like, oh, we want to have an interactive experience for this part of the curriculum that we're doing, we can provide that. Business and entrepreneurship, that's also a big one that we do. So if they want kids to start thinking about what can I do for a business, which is something that's not taught too much in high schools, but we have our own, where students get to design and plan out different business ideas and they get to collaborate. Throughout these sessions, we are constantly asking them questions to think about what they're doing and what they want to be doing. And after we finish the incursions, we do a debrief and like, well, what VR experiences did you find most interesting? Did you figure out something about yourself that you previously didn't know? And then we provide them outlets to explore that with the careers card. Yes. We provide outlets so that they can explore what they found out, whether it be through having a conversation with their parents, looking online, and a whole bunch of other resources to provide. Because I mean, that's it. The wonderful thing about the incursions, they really get students thinking, because a lot of them is like, I never thought of this as a job, or like, oh, I never really thought of this application of what we've been studying. Or a good example for, we had a job up in WA in Geraldton, and they're a big fishing town. And we actually did a experience where we focused on aquaculture, because that's where a lot of students have their passions for, because they spend a lot of time with the ocean. So we were able to provide a personalized experience for them and to get them thinking about, well, what can you do in the aquaculture industry while providing an interactive and a hands-on environment.
Thanks, Lee. So as Liam was saying, while we've got all these amazing experiences, we also factor in that students all learn differently, and we work to support all the work that the amazing careers people do with the students. So it's picking up on the strengths work or the interests work and so on that schools are doing, and really allowing them to bring those ideas to life, trying out different real life experiences in virtual reality. And we're really mindful that, we are, some of the teams accredited in the Moresby profile. So we do, and everyone is interested in students and their careers and inspiring them. So we also have a structured format. It's not just putting the headsets on the student, as Liam was saying, that facilitated experiences with breaks, discussions, pen and paper work, talking to the person next to you. We do customise and personalise the experience based on what the school is looking for at that point in time. And we really want to work to support all the great work that the government's doing and careers practitioners are doing to really help students see more possibilities for themselves, build up their confidence about what they can do and their capabilities, and really support that growth mindset, and get them thinking about their careers and how do I develop a career and learn more and engage with different people, and get them to be excited about it, not that it's something to be fearful of, and to understand that they'll have lots of different careers. So at this point, particularly year 9 and 10, it's about being really curious about what's out there that they might want to learn more about. And VR is a great way to be curious in private with the headset. No one knows what you're doing. You can't fail, and you can really try different things on. We're keen to open it up. If people have questions about anything that we've covered, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask us any questions you might have. People using any VR or anything in their roles already?
I know we haven't provided too much of an insight of like what is in the VR headsets of like kind of what our apps look like. So I definitely recommend if you've got time, just looking up VR apps in 2023, because you can see a lot has changed, like the technology and the quality has improved over the many years.
That's a good question, Marty. Most of our programs are interactive. We know that there's providers out there which is more like a video, a sort of a 360 video or a video. The whole point of Mindflight7 is that it is immersive and interactive that they're doing, rather than sitting back and watching. And so some of them actually, some of the job shadowing ones are more watching, because you're kind of like, although there's a couple of good ones which even I don't necessarily like the watching ones, but there's a couple of really good construction ones with the job shadowing where you actually get a great sense. And I love that they say, and to do this, you need maths. So they sometimes give really good career tips too in the job shadowing ones for the students. But the majority of our experience are actually immersive and interactive and doing, because we believe that students learn best, and it brings all those other bits that they do at school to life by doing. And I haven't actually gone to any schools with students with a disability, but we have actually worked, and you might have more of an idea, we actually have worked with a lot of special needs students, neurodiverse, and students with physical disabilities as well. So we do, and we don't find it's actually, interestingly enough, for students and VR, it doesn't seem to be much of a limitation.
I'd say, 90% of students with disabilities have not many problems with handling with the VR experience. I know we've had a few students with like cerebral palsy that have very few motor functions, because a lot of the experiences we provided, like they are still interactive, but it's not necessarily a case of like, oh, I need to like move around, surround, and like interact with stuff. But we've had a lot of people who are neurodiverse. We've had physical disabilities. We have a big field with the deaf, the Auslan. So we have different applications.
Yeah, and I think Jackie actually had someone who was blind. I don't know how, or partially blind. And I know I had a student with one arm who, credit to him, did the forklift simulation, which you need two hands. I don't know how he managed to do it, but he managed to learn how to drive a forklift with the two controllers in one arm. So kids are pretty amazing and inspiring when we go out. We don't necessarily, it's, Shauna, the experiences are for students. Do you mean not school groups like an individual student? Is that the question, or is it, do you...
We do teacher demos as well. Like we go to schools and do teacher demos and stuff. If that was part of the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't work in a school. I work in private practice with school kids, or with clients who are from grade 10 through to probably 30. Not their kids, but you get the gist of what I'm meaning. Are any of your products available for use by private practitioners with clients
That's a really good
that
question.
are young?
We haven't had that question before.
Johannes wants to say something.
Hi. I just adding, we do work with RTO in Queensland, and we kind of help them to increase their virtual reality capability by providing two headsets, and they basically use it in their practice. So yeah, we can, like, our aim is really helping kids. So yeah, any means necessary, we can form a partnership and help you become VR ready.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Right.
I think.
The other thing we do offer is we do come and do a demonstration at school, so often with a teacher, and sometimes the teacher will bring a colleague or some students along, and we also do fly out virtual headset demonstrations, because sometimes people are in remote areas, and we actually do a lot of work in remote areas with remote students. So that's another way, because I think if you haven't done VR, until you've put the headset on and gone through the experiences, it's really hard to get a sense of how amazing it is and how inspiring it is for students in subjects and careers. So we do demonstrations to get people familiar with what it's all about.
I know we've had oh, sorry.
No, sorry, Liam. Yeah.
I said we've had a few questions. What I remember was someone asked us, like, "Oh, like, this is cool and all, but is it a fad necessarily with VR technology?" As we've seen through, like, Meta, have had their controversies surrounding it. And I think the wonderful analogy of that is when you think about the computing, how computers used to work, used to punch in code, but then Microsoft made the Windows OS to create the barrier of entry a lot lower, so you didn't have to learn the code. And I think we personally believe that virtual reality and augmented reality, whether it be for what we use through headsets or some kind of application for the future, that I think really this is kind of where we're going. This is the next big step in computing for education especially, but I think in general life.
Yeah. And it will become more and more affordable. The VR headsets are becoming more increasingly affordable, and there's more and more content. And I know, like, for the teenagers, there's that Among Us online game, but there's Among Us in VR, which is really popular. And so, younger people are starting to use it, or some of them are, but I think it's starting to grow. And as you saw with that Pfizer video, Liam and I were talking earlier on, VR might look very different in 5 years. It might not be a headset, it might be on your phone, or just you have glasses like the Google glasses or something, and it's VR. Who knows what shape it will take, and the technology will continue to evolve.
And we plan to be there through it all, so it'll be fun. For what class sizes do we usually work with? I think the max we ever usually do is 30 is usually our max, because you can, it's quite easy to, like we just got a classroom, we have the chairs set out, and because it's an individual experience, it's not hard to necessarily facilitate for 30 students. But we also provide, we've done jobs for 5, 10, 15, 20, but we have a wide range of.
And sometimes we'll
classes.
run 2 classes concurrently. So we'll always have at least 2 people from Mindflight7 facilitating a classroom of students. So sometimes a school will say, we've got 120 students, we want to, in year 9, do the Career Taster program. So we'll have a team and we'll go for half the day and do 2 classes concurrently. So there's lots of different ways around that. Yeah.
Do you want to tackle that one from Alison?
So thanks, Alison. You said that you've done the heart surgery. You missed the start of the webinar, which is not a problem. We've touched on how it can be targeted. Yes, we've to a degree, and we'll send the slides. Yeah, we've touched on some of the trades and how it really can help students get more clarity about. And as Liam was saying, particularly in WA, it's there's so many careers in trades, and they look very different. And trades doesn't mean it might be the student who really likes the OH&S or the project management side, but they love being on site. They like working with something tangible. They're super organised and conscientious, but they love, building and being involved in building things. Or they're more the artisans that love to create, build houses or so on, or it could be the electrical trades. So we really do try to help students really refine what a trade looks like for them and what's going to be more aligned. And the STEM, we spoke a little bit about the STEM as well. And as I said, for people who are interested, there's definitely the opportunity to have a demo, whether it's a real life demo or a virtual demo. So, yes, thanks, Alison. Great questions. And thank you, everyone, for your time today. We really appreciate you coming along. We know everyone's super busy, and as career professionals, I know you often wear many, many hats and do many, many different roles. So, we appreciate you taking the time today to come and join us.